Hi, welcome to this tutorial on using Adobe Photoshop. This is part 2, and here we're going to look at some basic painting and drawing tools using the brush and adjusting the settings, which is also useful for setting up an eraser tool, how to choose colours, how to use the fill bucket, and how to use the eyedropper. So a little bit of basic tools and basic colour work here. I'm going to swap over to Photoshop for now. So this is picking up directly from where we were at the end of the last video. We are going to leave layers for now. That's going to be a future video. So we're just going to paint on the one layer. I'm going to come over here and grab the brush tool, and we'll see how it's set up. As you move your cursor over the page, you'll see a little circle, and that will show you how big the stroke is going to be. So I'm just clicking and dragging with my mouse, and it lets you paint. So your brush may look very different, and it may even be a different colour. We're going to look at changing the brush settings up here. We're going to look at using brush settings over here, and we're going to look at changing colours down here. So first off, how to change colours. Come down here and we can see we have what are known as colour swatches. We've got a foreground swatch and a background swatch. The brush is working with the foreground colour, so if I click on that, or double click, sorry, it'll bring up our colour picker, and it will let you know up here whether it's foreground or background colour that you're choosing. To choose a colour, work with the rainbow to start with. So if I want a nice orange, you can either click or click and drag. And then inside here you've got a tone window. This here shows you a preview of the colour that you are going to get, and this shows you your current colour. You see that red is equal to this red over here. So if I want a nice light colour, but it's not quite red enough, I want it, there we go, nice and orange, and then click on OK and test it out. I can see that as I'm drawing here, we're getting some dark patches and some light patches. That's because this brush has a low flow setting, so it's slightly transparent, and as I paint over it more and more, it's going to get darker and darker. To adjust the size of the brush, we'll come up here to the second item. So there's the first item, which is type of brush, and the second item is size, and if you click on this little down arrow, you've got a few options here. So we can change the size, and you can get a preview of the size by just moving your cursor over the page. And you can adjust the hardness here, so we've got how hard or soft the brush is. So if I take the hardness right down to 0, and I've put the size at 175, and then start painting, you can see we get a much different effect than what we had before. Photoshop brushes are really powerful, and you can get a huge number of different brushes. There's a vast variety of brushes that you can get within the program, and you can also create your own brushes, and you can also download brushes from other people. I'm going to adjust the flow settings back up here to 100% to see how that changes things. You can see immediately it's coming out stronger. Just going to go and change the colour. If I go back over here and change the hardness to 100%, we get a very, very, very harsh outline. So we can see the brush is actually just a circle, and it's repeating the circle, and depending upon how strong of a computer you've got, will determine how smooth that line is. This one's struggling because I've got the screen recording software running concurrently. Okay, so over here on the right in the panels, we have got the brush settings again, and then the collection of brushes in here. So you can have nosy round in here. To be honest, I don't use specific brushes terribly much in my work. but you might. So you can twirl these open, and you can see a lot of them will say pressure on them. Those are designed to be used with drawing tablets. So if you're using a mouse, that looks really lovely. And get this one, it's got a nice tapered end, and then it goes soft, and then it goes tapered again. When I draw with it, it's quite disappointing because I'm not using a pressure-sensitive drawing tablet. So just if you're wondering why they look a bit funny. You can get a lot of textural brushes in there. And this brush is it's like a wet blending brush. So you can kind of blend and mix together the colours from underneath. We go into brush settings, you can pick a normal brush, and under here, if you click down through here, you've got oodles of additional options that you can change on any particular brush. So I'm not going into a lot of detail there, I'm just letting you know that it's there if you want to have a play with advanced brush settings. As I say, I usually just work with very standard brushes. And the primary methods of adjusting a brush that I use are the size, the hardness, and the opacity. So when something's 100% opaque, you can't see through it. If I make it only 50% opaque, it's translucent. And if I make it, let's say really low, let's say 3% opaque, it is happening. If I keep clicking, it is building up. You can mainly see through it, and it's getting a lot of translucency to it, so there's more transparency there. Just like when you use a brush and you can make the settings up here, the eraser tool, where's that gone? There it is, keyboard shortcut is E, also has brush settings. And the eraser tool tries to emulate what will happen when you use an actual eraser in real life. It just literally rubs things off the page. It will actually take away everything. This layer happens to have a white background on it, but if you're working on another layer, let's say I'm just going to pop another layer on there for now. Grab my brush and put my opacity up somewhat. So just put something on the second layer. If I grab my eraser tool, I can then rub parts of that object out, but you'll notice that the layer itself, this second layer that I'm using, has got a transparent background to it. It doesn't have that white background. Remember I said that the background layer itself was special? Well, every other layer is just transparent out of the box. Gone back to the move tool now, and I'm just moving this second item around. With the eraser tool, you can change the size and hardness and the opacity, just like you can with a brush, which is really handy just for getting in for those details. If you want to zoom in or zoom out, there's a couple of different ways of doing that. So I use my left hand, I'm right-handed, so I'm using the mouse with my right hand, and I put my left hand on the keyboard. So I put my thumb on the spacebar, and then I use my other fingers to work with the special keys over to the left, like Control and Alt and Shift, or if you're on a Mac it's Control, Shift, Option and Command. So we've got those special trigger keys which help you work faster with the program. You can search up a list of keyboard shortcuts if you go to Google Chrome, sorry, if you go to Google and search for Photoshop keyboard shortcuts list, you can get yourself a nice list of shortcuts, and the best way to start using them is to start practicing them. So the one I like is Control Space. If I hold that down, and then click, I can zoom in. So it's Command Space or Control Space. It also means I can zoom in and zoom out. And as I zoom in, you'll see that this is the base unit of a raster file. That is a pixel, so that's one pixel there. And here's another one, and another one, and another one. So when we zoom out, they start to coalesce, and our brains see it as a single harmonious object. So you can zoom in anywhere you like. And this is a key part of how Photoshop works. Once you know that it's just different coloured pixels next to each other, it becomes easier to know what it's doing and how it's doing it. That's all Photoshop can do. All its magic is about knowing where a pixel is, what colour a pixel is, how dark or how light it is, how transparent it is, and what's above and below it in the layer stack. So when Photoshop knows those things, it can do things which appear to be magic, but they're not really. You can alternatively hold down Alt or Option and use the scroll wheel on your mouse, and this will scroll to wherever your cursor is. So if I put my cursor up here, hold Alt and scroll in, it'll go over to that area. Another option that people like to use for zooming in and zooming out is Control or Command plus or minus, and that will just go into the centre and out again. I like to use this one, Control or Command space and click, because I find it gives me more control over where I'm ending up. To pan around, you'll see this little hand. So it means I can zoom in and then I can pan around and move without having to zoom out again. I just hold space down and it turns into the hand, which is equivalent to this hand tool, which lets me grab the paper, grab the page and pan around in my document. You can see I can see the edge of the document here. If you ever get lost, or you get too close in and you don't know where you are, you can come up to View and choose Fit on Screen, which is Command or Control 0, and it will just pop back to that zoom. So it makes it easier to find out where you are. Okay, we've had a look at choosing colours. Two more things I'd like to show you. One is using the Fill tool. So I'm going to turn off this layer, get rid of it, and then click on the background layer. So this is the one that is active that I'm working on, and I'm going to come across here. Now, some of the tools are stacked together. You can tell if you've got a bunch of tools stacked because they've got this little tiny arrow in the bottom corner, little triangle. Click and hold, and this little submenu will pop out, and you can see that we've got different tools all stacked under there, and they've all often got the same keyboard shortcut. The keyboard shortcut will activate whichever one is on top of the stack. So if I choose this one, the paint bucket tool, now if I use the keyboard shortcut of G, it will go to the paint bucket tool rather than the gradient tool. I find the paint bucket tool slightly more useful for my work. So I'm going to choose a colour, double click, use the rainbow, pick your colour, click OK, and because we've got the paint bucket tool, it's a single click and it will fill any contiguous areas. That means any areas that are touching. You notice that it didn't go into this area here with the oranges because there's orange there. It did make a hard line. If I just zoom in there, it's made a relatively hard line. It's because there is some orange coming up to the edge. This orange was created with a soft brush, what's known as a soft brush. The brush had less hardness to its edge. So when I dropped this yellow here, it just flooded like pouring water into a bowl. It flooded up to the edge of where it could reach. If I choose to click on this area here, have a think about where you anticipate the yellow might go. So I'm going to click here, and it was either going to fill this space here or this space here. Now, another keyboard shortcut that's really handy is Control or Command Z, undo. That is Edit, Undo. So you can see there's actually a line here, but it has gone all the way up to here, and it's quite a messy line because it's just seeing the edges between colours, and that's all it's doing. So you can create some interesting effects using the paint bucket. The last tool I'd like to show you is the eyedropper tool. I use this one quite a lot for picking colours. So we've used this method here where we double click on the foreground swatch and choose a colour. But let's say we've got a pink here and we really want to replicate that pink. So I'm going to choose the eyedropper tool. The keyboard shortcut is I. Just make sure you have actually got the eyedropper tool and not any of these alternatives. There's a couple that look very similar. Bring it over what you'd like to sample, slurp up your sample, and you can see there it is all ready to go. Now I can come back to either the brush tool or the paint bucket tool, and I can reuse that colour wherever I'd like. Okay, so this has made a jolly fine mess. It's just to get to play with the tools and to learn what they do and how they work. A lot of the options with using a brush and using an eraser, using fill tools will become useful as we learn more about advanced techniques such as masking and recolouring things. Okay, that's all for now.